Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. If you've got any questions today, then you can type them into the question chat box and we'll make a log of them. And at the end of the session, the idea is that I'll talk for maybe 20 minutes. And then after that time, if there's any questions, then feel free to ask them and we can look at each of those. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the future of neuroscience and, look at this idea as, has neuroscience finally arrived? It's been around for quite a long time now, maybe 10 years since it really made a dent into the market research industry. But has it finally arrived? And what's the future of it going to be? Well, we'll explore that over the next 20 minutes. Okay, but first, what's the main aim of a brand? Yes, trust is important. Yes, we want people to buy our products, but actually, what's the main thing a brand needs to do? Well, above all else, a brand's main aim should be to emotionally connect with people, because we know from neuroscience and from all of the literature that really it's this emotional connection that gives us long-lasting relationships. And when we have long-lasting relationships, that's when we can really build a relationship with our consumers. But don't take my word for it. We have this paradigm that we know that, first of all, neuroscience shows us that we feel, and it's emotions that are our heart of our decision-making process. And it's only if we have that process happening that only then do we do, and then we do. Now, I would say that, but someone much more well-known than me has said that before. So Damasio has said that emotion is at the heart of our decision-making process. We're not purely rational or emotional. Each mode informs the other, and we cannot make rational choices without emotion. So here we can see how important emotion is. And we can also see, as we will see later, how important still the idea of the explicit or the rational is. The role of qual and of quant research to fulfill this do and think in our paradigm. So really what we've said here is that the role of neuroscience is now more important than ever before. So hopefully you all agree, and that's why you're here. So let's rock on with the rest of it. Now, before we go into the details, I thought this was really interesting. At the beginning of the year, the KFC marketing chief, David Tim, said something really interesting. And why it was really interesting was this guy wasn't a neuroscientist. This guy wasn't a market researcher. He was the marketing chief, okay? So someone from a bit of a different world. And he said, KFC is now looking to connect with consumers on an emotional level, rather than appeal to their rational side of their brain. Marketing as a whole is undergoing transformation. We now know through neuroscience how people's brains work and what affects their decision making. So what we're trying to do is take in the new knowledge and say, this is how we put it together. This is how brain actually works, and this is how we should be marketing. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting. This is a guy outside the field who's saying how important this is. This is how neuroscience has permeated the different levels now. It's not just neuroscience, it's not just research, but it's also marketing and beyond. It just puts into context how important understanding of the unconscious is. But just before I go on, let's just be clear on what I'm talking about when I say neuroscience, because it's a bit of a catch-all term, and it certainly does embrace many different areas. So when I talk about neuroscience today, really I'm talking about brain imaging techniques such as fMRI, such as EEG, biometric techniques such as skin conductance, eye tracking, heart rate, facial recognition, and then psychological techniques such as reaction time testing that use the speed of response rather than any invasive techniques as a measure of unconscious processing. So all of these types of techniques have come onto the market at various levels, and these are the sorts of things we're talking about when we say neuroscience. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So now let's look into the future. But Of course, before we need to know where we're going to go, we need to know where we've come from. So we need to go back to the future. Now, I don't know how many of you remember this from the original film, but what happens is Marty runs into Doc's house just because he's just gone back in time. And Doc says to him, hold on, hold on, hold on, before you say anything. And he puts a big plunger on Marty's head. And he's trying to read Marty's mind. And I think a little bit, that's what happened in the early days. 10 years ago, this thing came onto the market, neuroscience came into research, and everyone got really, really excited and thought, hang on, this is going to be, you know, totally new. This is going to solve all of my problems. And I think when neuroscience came onto the market maybe 10 or so years ago, that there was this idea of shiny new things, of the idea that, you know, there was this new jazzy, sexy technique that was out there. It wasn't online research, it wasn't face-to-face, it wasn't a conjoint analysis, it was something really new. And that was great because it opened the door for neuroscience in this whole new world of insight, and it generated a lot of buzz and a lot of headlines and a lot of people talking about it. But you know, why is it then that if everyone was talking about it, why is it not become the dominant force in market research that we might have thought it might have been 10 years ago? Well, one of the reasons for that is I think that two different worlds came together or missed each other. There was the world of academics and there was the world of business, and those two worlds were worlds apart. So I've worked in academics, so I'm allowed to say this. So in the world of academics, everything moves quite slowly. It's quite nice. You get to consider everything for quite a long time. Everything has to be to a very fine level of detail. Everything is peer reviewed and we need to make sure it's properly done. But in the world of research, in the world of marketing, everything needs to be done quickly. Quickly, we need to have decisions, and those decisions need to be translatable and actionable within the business. But the problem is the world of business and the world of academics didn't really talk to the same language, because the academic guys were telling the business guys, oh, I've used this particular technique and it's got, you know, 20 electrodes and this is my mean high pass filter that I'm using. And the guys on the business side didn't really understand that. And the problem was there were some great studies collected, but in the business world, there was no one that could translate this language of neuroscience into actionable insights. And the problem with that is it left a bit of a dry feeling of, well, what can neuroscience, I can't really understand what neuroscience can do. I've got this great technique, but how do I apply it to my business? But you know, that was 10 years ago. So now, what's the landscape look like now? Well, you see, what I think is that the current landscape, there's a perfect storm brewing, and we've come a long way since those early days. And I think now the scene is set for neuroscience to thrive. And I'm just going to take you through a couple of reasons why I think that's the case, and why neuroscience is now really taking hold, and why it's going to become so important in the future. First of all, Kahneman. Who's probably not read Kahneman's book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, or at least got a copy on their bookshelf, because no one ever quite makes it to the end. Kahneman's put System 1 thinking in, and the world of the implicit into as a common language currency. Everyone talks about it now. We receive briefs all the time, even at Marketing Sciences, for just very standard pieces of research, such as tracking research, that specify that it needs to include System 1 thinking. So this idea and appreciation of the importance of the unconscious is now there. And so it's because it's become a current currency, it means that we can talk about it a little bit more and we appreciate its importance. Secondly, I may argue be a little bit different, is something a bit more personable, wearable tech. If you think about wearable devices such as watches and those sorts of things, we're now obsessed almost with our own bodily rhythms and the time that we wake up and go to bed and what we eat and all of these things that happen at our unconscious level, our heart rate and the number of steps we take and all of this sorts of information. We're becoming aware of it, and we're aware that it's important for us to know about it. And that sort of consumer framing then transfers across to our business life, because we understand that we need to understand more about the unconscious mind of the consumer. perhaps most importantly is tech and cost. Because one of the arguments or one of the struggles for neuroscience in the early days, especially because it was driven by lots of startup companies, is that there was the tech out there, but it wasn't consumer friendly. It was lab based. I'm not sure if anyone's had an EEG study done maybe 10 years ago and had to wash their hair afterwards because it was covered in gel, or if anyone's been in an fMRI scanner. But now tech is more scalable. The devices now are very portable, such as EEG, can be taken to various venues. They're easy to fit. Research is easy to conduct. And most importantly, from a client point of view, the costs are much lower. So the cost of the equipment and the data processing are much lower, which puts them into line with existing types of studies, which makes them a viable and scalable option. And also credibility. When something new comes into a field, it's a bit maverick. It's a little bit like the Wild West. There was a lot of companies out there promising the earth, but not everyone was able to deliver. But now neuroscience has become accountable. It has its own association, the Neuromarketing Science and Business Association, has its own board and code of ethics that it has to obey, and it integrates fully within governing bodies of market research such as SMR and the MRS and WARC. So it's now a credible organisation and a credible field. But I think we need to, there's still work to do. I mean, it's great that, guys like you want to learn about this and are on this webinar today, and it means that you're keen to learn. But in order for the field to grow and to really take hold fully, we need to conduct webinars like this. We need to have workshops. We need to educate not just the research buyers, but other people in the business, the marketeers, the brand managers, so that the industry and clients can understand the language that we're talking, the role of the unconscious, and it will help to normalize the field, because we need to normalize neuroscience. Because in order for neuroscience, what we want from neuroscience is neuroscience to become the new normal. Okay, it shouldn't be an event. If you think, when was the last time someone came to you in your business and said, oh, wow, I've got this amazing correlation I want to show you. It's amazing. I'm doing well, it does happen here sometimes. But the point is that the things like correlations, like a conjoint analysis, like a piece of online research, like a product test, they're not an event. They're just an everyday piece of research that informs into the insight strategy. And neuroscience should be that. It shouldn't be an event. It should just be another research tool that feeds into the insight streams. And as it is now, and as it should be in the future, and how it will grow, is neuroscience will only be realised as it's fully integrated into existing methodology. Going back to what I said before, where you had the academics on one side and the business on the other side, integration is key. We need to be able to integrate neuroscience into the existing world of quantitative and qualitative research, because neuroscience will give us a deeper level of why understanding. But we still need to probe and understand the what, understand the behaviour, understand what's going on in the market, what people say, what they do. All of these are important parts. As an example, from the work that we do, with Walnut Unlimited and Marketing Sciences Unlimited together, we work in conjunction. So neuroscience seeks to answer certain questions, and it works in conjunction with existing quantitative and qualitative methodology to ensure we get a 360 view on the research question. So we understand the role of the unconscious and the role of the conscious together, not in isolation, just as Damasio said. And we've had a number of clients have had positive experiences with this type of approach of integrating. So at Virgin Trains, for example, they carried out quite a lot of standard advertising and brand tracking, but they complemented that research with our combined NeuroQual approach, which takes neuroscience brain imaging and combines it with qualitative research. And they really allowed you to go beyond the realms of traditional research. Or for example, at Hovis, they've tried to take reaction time testing alongside their standard consumer research techniques to give an additional layer of insight. So it's about integrating to get better levels of insight. It's not all about the future being about technology and everyone's going to have the tech, but it's about what we're going to do with it, where we're going to apply it, where it should be integrated. So I thought I should put some predictions in, because this is the sort of thing you should do when you're doing a bit of future work. So what's the future going to look like then? If I had to pick a couple of top things that you can come back to me on in 10 years and to say if I was right or wrong, what's the future going to look like for neuroscience and its application to research? Okay, first of all, reaction time testing. So just to recap, reaction time testing looks at the speed of response. Okay, so the speed of response to a question. So if I ask you a question such as, is Apple a brand I trust? You know, what you might say to me is, oh yeah, I agree with that. But how fast do you say that? How convinced are you? Okay, what's the strength of that emotional connection? Now, the great thing about reaction time testing is it just looks like a normal survey to the consumer. And I think that that's what's going to happen. It's so normal that reaction time testing will become so mainstream, it will no longer even be thought of as a specialist technique. It will be like online research has become. Online, no one thinks of online research as being a particular specialist technique. It's just another tool. It's another way of doing research. And reaction time testing is going to be like that. It's going to be integrated into existing trackers, into existing studies, to give this system one view quickly and easily. Secondly, I think there'll be a big change in the way mobile research is done. And by that I mean mobile as in moving around. Okay, so not mobile phones. Mobile neuroscience technology will evolve and it will change the way that we do in-store research. I mean, yes, there are techniques available at the moment to do certain types of neuroscience in-store, but they have a lot of limitations to them. However, that's going to change. The pace of technology development will catch up with us, and we're going to have to work out how best to use it, but it's really going to open up, just like neuroscience testing has opened up a whole new understanding of advertising effectiveness and how advertising and diagnostics are carried out. It will be the same for in-store research and how we understand shopper journeys. Technology is going to expand. That's just going to happen, probably faster than we can keep up. But this is key. In order for neuroscience to properly be grounded within the business, we must ensure that there are always experts on hand on both sides to be able to take the results from neuroscience work and to be able to translate them into actionable insights for a business. And that's both working with existing research agencies and working with the client, and to make sure that the great work that's done from neuroscience can be translated into something that the marketing and the brand managers and the CEO can understand, because that's how it's really going to become effective, by actually making sure it's applied. So there'll be a growth in the role of the neuroconsultant. Now I'm going to be a bit controversial, why not? Because no one can talk back to me. So creativity. We think that neuroscience is sometimes criticised for creating some sort of neurodeterminism, especially through advertising testing, i.e. Neuroscience from the advertising testing will tell you what particular scenes are working well and which ones don't, etc. And some people may think that because of this, we may create some sort of neurodeterministic outlook that says the best ad will include certain elements, and it will kill creativity. But I'm going to say the opposite. You still need great creative ideas. Neuroscience will never create great creative ideas. Neuroscience will amplify great creative ideas. The most successful research advertising agencies of the future will be the ones that embrace neuroscience wholeheartedly. They don't see it as something that is there to criticize their outputs, it's something that will enhance their creativity, make it the best, the most emotionally engaging advertising that it could ever be, to enhance what's already there. And the last one is that emotional metrics will be embedded within the business. So you won't just have KPIs such as NPS and those sorts of things and conversion models that you're used to, but emotional metrics will become a standard metric alongside those, because, as I said before, for example, reaction times will be embedded within existing research. And so these emotional KPIs will become standard. So what are my final thoughts to sum up what we've said? In addition to what I've said already, and I've hinted at, we probably know less about the brain than most other things. And so we're going to continue to learn. Our knowledge about the brain and what it can tell us and how it can be applied to our businesses will constantly evolve, and we need to keep up the pace with that. We need to, the experts need to keep up to pace with the literature and how it's evolving and how it can be applied. And because of that, neuroscience will challenge our existing ways and methods of thinking. And maybe we need to be a bit brave, and maybe as we develop into the future, we need to accept that sometimes some of the things that we might have done before aren't the right way of doing things. And neuroscience might give us insights into that. It might be the existing neuroscience methods that we had before. We might need to challenge our way of thinking for those as well. But it's going to throw up new questions that we'll need to address and get the answers to. But in order for that to work, there is no way that any of this will work without integration. Neuroscience is not a solution on its own, but it's integration alongside existing methods, and that is the key. To take experts from both neuroscience and research and bring them together, people who know their work the best, bring those people together to take the science, to translate it into actionable insights. So it doesn't just end up like we had before 10 years ago with your academics on one side and your business worlds on the other side who couldn't talk to each other. Neuroscience offers a completely new glimpse into the world of the unconscious, a completely new understanding of consumer decision making, and by integrating it inside our businesses and inside existing methodology, we can make sure we get the best insights. So thanks very much. That concludes the main part of it. We're going to take some questions in a minute if there are any questions. I'd just like to say before I go on to any of the questions that just a couple of things. If you want to know more, you want to be a bit more immersed inside neuroscience, then Walnut is running a consumer neuroscience workshop on Tuesday the 14th of July. So that will be myself, Dr. Annie Myers, and also Dr. Christina Balanzo, and we will be hosting an all-day workshop. So if you're interested in that, as John Morris from Carlsberg said, I thought it was brilliant introductions to neuro. We didn't pay him to say that. So if you're interested, please get in touch for that. Also, our next webinar, which will be coming up quite soon, will be run by Christina from Walnut, and she will show you our 12 human insights presentation, 12 learnings from neuroscience that every brand should know. So that will be that's a really great presentation. It was done at the Information Exchange, went down really great, and it will show what we've learned from neuroscience and how that can really be applied and how it has been applied by different brands. So just to finish up, if there's any questions, I'm going to have Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Right. Okay, so we've got a question about, have we met any resistance from the like of ad agencies with regard to neuroscience? Well, I kind of touched on that a little bit. Yes and no. So there are some creative agencies that see it as a way of criticism, but there are others who see its power, and it's sort of down to us a little bit to convince them that it needs to be, that it is a completely valid technique. It's just as valid as every other research technique out there. So yes and no, but we've got some work to do. I've got, oh gosh, they're coming in thick and fast now. Right. Next question. Right, great. Jeremy Martin. To pick up on your point about combining current methods with neuroscience, it is now much cheaper, but it is still an additional cost on top, true. So how do we best put across the level of additional benefit from incorporating it to get sign-off from the extra cost? How do we showcase these new techniques? That's a great point, Jeremy. So what we always say is that neuroscience adds an additional layer of insight. So, you know, just take reaction time testing, for example. So reaction time testing is great because it could take, for example, your traditional brand tracking metrics of brand perception, which you might find there's not much white space between the brands, for example. And reaction time testing simply adds up, gives an additional layer of insight on top of that. So it helps to show how neuroscience can quite easily be applied to something that exists and give a new layer. There is a little bit of extra cost, yes, just like I guess if you were to add on, you know, a conjoint analysis or something into your piece of research. But I think that the costs are coming down, and like if you were to do, for example, a standalone piece of advertising research, the cost would be almost comparable to a, you know, a moderately sized qualitative only piece of research. So I think they are coming down. We can maybe pick up some examples offline after this about how you can showcase these techniques. Okay. The webinar on 12 human insights will be on July. It will be sometime in July. The date's not confirmed yet, but it will be on Twitter, it will be on LinkedIn, and we'll probably send it out on email as well. So it will be very soon, I promise. Okay. Naomi McCann. In our area, we are fighting a small battle at the minute of ensuring insight is at the heart of everything we do, but this is us even getting it across the benefit of traditional research methods. Have you got any tips about influencing people and really advocating neuroscience? Yes, I have. My tip would be get them immersed in it, you know, have a workshop, have some, you know, properly immersive experiences, lots of examples, see how it's been applied to businesses, take it into the context. For example, if you're an advertising agency, get the planners involved. You know, this is the sort of thing we do in our workshops. So get some case studies, get to see people that added value that it gives you, and you know, the perceived costs as well, and not always the case. Okay, I've got another question there. Okay, from Lee. Have we got examples of agencies using everyday wearables like fitness bands to measure things like heart rate when watching TV ads? There are, we have what we would term wearables, which you can use for watching things like TV ads. Without getting into the detail of it, it depends on the metrics you want. Basically, the issue with wearable devices, biometric devices, is that quite often they pick up levels of arousal, but arousal itself is not a measure of valence, and so valence is reasonably hard to derive from pure biometric techniques. So there are some things that we could chat about, and there's some proxies for valence that we can calculate, but generally for things like TV ad testing, we generally advocate EEG because it's a much more effective technique. But there are some alternatives that I'm happy to chat about. Oh, right. Glynis. Hi, Glynis. Yes, I have. But I'd probably be able to, there's some. I'll probably pick that up with you offline. Yeah. You probably know what it's like. It's always hard to get people to share the research out because no one wants to share their examples. But yes. And I think we've got one more just come in. Do you find that consumers change their behaviour at all when they're in a neuro study? That's a good question actually, because some people think, well, you know, you're putting them into a slightly artificial environment when you're putting an EEG headset on their head, for example. I would say that from a purely methodological point of view, the point is that everyone's neuro state effectively is identical. So everyone's going into the study exactly the same, the environment's exactly the same. then anecdotally from sort of Vox Pops and follow-up work we've done, people generally self-report being quite relaxed and forgetting that they were really there, because effectively they're just watching lots of reels of TV ads, for example. So I don't think any more than any other market research study. Yeah, okay, if there's, I don't think there's any more questions there. There's quite a few, so thank you very much. So if anyone's got any questions at all, anything else that they'd like to follow up with us, then please email us. A recording and transcript will also be mailed to you. So if you want to listen to it again, if any questions come up. Also, please look out again for the 12 Insights presentation that will be coming up that Christina will be doing. And if you're interested to have a whole day workshop and get your hands a bit dirty with some neuroscience research, then sign up for our consumer neuroscience workshop on July the 14th. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon. That one there. Does it stop recording?